Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thought I'd do something a little different today and do a rundown of some of my original gear I got when first starting out. So, gonna have my first amp and first guitar I bought 100% myself. Start with the guitar. Have a circa 2005 made in Mexico Fender Standard Telly. You'll notice some special, unique stuff about it. We'll look at that in just a second. Alright, some of the first things you might notice when we start getting a little closer. So we got this hole ported here. Standard three-way switch. It doesn't have the cap on it, but otherwise it's the same. Knob, knob, knob. 3 instead of 2. Might be wondering, hey, what's that about? Well, I literally bought this while in college, and the first thing I did was cut the thing open with the idea of installing a second three-way switch so I could have the S-wire controls on the guitar itself. You'll notice that's not still there because I didn't quite love that. But one of the products that came about from trying to do that, having a second three-way switch in there, was I also needed to install a second tone knob. So what we have here, volume, neck tone, bridge tone. Get this popped open. Show you how that happens. And woo. Alright, might be difficult to see, but you'll notice the yellow cable coming in here and the white cable coming in here. Those are the two different pickup inputs coming into the three-way switch, right? Normally what ends up happening on these Telecaster layouts is on the back side of the three-way switch, you have a second cable coming off the ground, and that's going to be your tone circuit. In this case, I think we can see it right there. This black cable here is at the same solder point. So instead of being on the back side of the switch, it's on the front side of the switch. Simple adjustment. That's more along the lines of how like a Les Paul is going to have the wiring set up going to the switch. That way you have an independent tone control. Obviously I don't have an independent volume control, but you get the idea. It's super tight in there. So I've got the Jupiter capacitor here. Bought a tone upgrade kit for it. I'm not exactly sure how much it's doing at this point, because it's been a while since I tested that. One of the standard features, or standard configurations for tone circuits is also you have a capacitor going to ground. And the way this is set up is both tone knobs should share a ground point, and that ground point goes through the capacitor itself. That way you only have to buy one instead of two. One of the other details here that is maybe not the best option, but it's the one I ended up going with, was more the 60s wiring approach, where you'll notice that these tone knobs are only using 2 solder joints rather than 3. So technically it's a variable resistor off of the center rather than having one side go to ground, the other side going to output, and the output would go to the switch. I can't remember exactly why I opted for that when constructing. Space was probably a factor, because remember there would have been a three-way switch in here as well at one point, and that hole over there would have had an additional control in there too out of pure necessity. Also if you look, did have to cut into the body itself to make space for the additional control. Looks like a lot of work. Now we should probably talk about why I ended up keeping it and what I get out of it. here is the main thing you get out of it. You have more precise tone controls for rhythm and lead settings. Here we have our bridge tone. Right here in this position, this will be wide open, right? I find that most of the time that's too much. Usually there's a sweet spot where the tone is barely pulling off right around here, where some of the harshness that can come out is tamed just a little bit. And that little bit makes a huge difference. When I'm playing clean, I tend to not want to be on the bridge pickup. But if you're playing distorted, you need something nasal, you need something that cut through, something with attitude, and the bridge does a better job. Neck pickup tends to be silky smooth. Bridge pickup needs to be a little bit harsh, but you don't want it too harsh, so my answer was this. One thing I've considered I haven't gotten around to is rather than having either a linear or audio taper for the tone knob, opt for reverse audio taper or type C. Reason being, right now this is somewhere around 9, maybe 9.5. If it's reverse audio taper, you'll have more throw for finding the sweet spot and get it more exactly where you want if you're only trying to take just a little off the top. That brings us to this guy here. Right now his top isn't on, but this would be fully open, so a lot of times that should be about 5 o'clock or 5 on the knob. A lot of times I like having it there. Run the middle position on the switch. You get the brightness from the bridge, you get the well-rounded tone from the neck, and you get a nice balance between the two. Nice intermediate position. My bread and butter for so much stuff. And if you want it even softer, just go to the neck. Nice, well-rounded, clean tone. You gotta get dirty. Just a flick of the switch away. Nice and easy. Alright, that also gets us to our amplifier of the era, the Behringer GX212. By no means is it good, but it's good enough. And with a little ingenuity, you can come up to some creative options. This one has seen some road wear, as you can see by our lovely parameter treble knob, effects A and B knobs. One of my biggest secrets with what I was doing is right there. This amplifier had been sitting in my parents' house for a few years, so I think it lost its presets saved. But right there is almost your clue. It's probably not your first guess what the effect is. It's a flanger reverb mix. I knew I wanted something to sweeten up the clean tones for when I was doing ska stuff, and the mix was a little too much for me, and I think we're to the default mix. So, parameter is reverb mix. That's a little too much. Let's get that down to say 20% maybe. Close enough. Let's try it 16. Just enough to give you a little bit of extra. Also, the flanger itself is a little too much to my taste for what I was going for at the time. 50% mix seems really high for what I was aiming for, so let's say 30% maybe. Still more motion than I was looking for. It's no longer super obvious that it's there, but it is there, and that's the key. See if I can get that help. Hey, I do remember how to save those effects. We got some other peculiarities here. I think because we're so low, we're losing some of the high end. Something sounds a little off. But this is more or less what the effect was. Let me try dropping that down a little bit and see about this. And there's just a tiny bit difference there. It's not a big difference, but because of the chorusing effect that happens with the flanger and the two signals going in and out of phase with each other, the highs end up coming through just a little more. It adds a little sweetness to it. It adds a little richness to it, and just a little bit on the overall tone that's just different enough that it's a little harder to copy, and that's kind of what I was going for. Alright, just as a quick example, going straight out of the nicer Super Reverb amp into microphone into our DAW. Given just a quick example of the tone knobs side to side. Right now I got the bridge tone set and all the way open. So we got this. Other side note, I have everything set to dead even. So everything's at 5 versus I'm only warming it up just a little bit. And then, for example, on the neck pickup, versus, that's about 7. I actually set the neck pickup significantly darker if you're listening. But when you put them together, this is what they both rolled down sounded like. Versus just running them both wide open. Obviously, we're talking about very, very subtle differences here, right? We're talking about the range difference between here and here. It's 1, maybe 1.5 lower. Like I said, I keep thinking about switching over to Type-C pot. That way it have a little more fine over control. And then for the neck pickup itself, going all the way from about here to over here. So 10 to about 5. Alright, Future David here with some final thoughts as we're wrapping up. I mentioned get creative, use some other stuff for your tone. There was a time when I was briefly playing with a local singer-songwriter by the name of Laura Miner, along with a couple other people. We didn't have a bass player, so one of the things I did with that exact same Behringer amp was I took the signal into the main amp, took the signal out of the send in the back, put it through a Tube Screamer clone, put it in the aux return, and then the main channel itself was going through an octave down, so you had a parallel signal, one with an octave down effect, one that could be either clean or distorted, but between the two it helped thicken up the sound and gave a little more full of a overall band sound. Sometimes you don't have the best tools, figure out how to use the tools you have the best you can. Be amazed what you can do with just a little bit of thought and just messing around just a tiny bit. Going back to the olden days, 70s rock, those guys playing those giant Marshall stacks, their lead tone, run the guitar wide open, run the amp wide open. Their rhythm tone, just wind back the volume knob on the guitar itself. Most of us don't think like that, but that helps clean up the sound. It also helps quiet the sound. Your volume pot, volume pedal, either one of those can make massive differences, especially going into a clipping stage. So just a little bit of ingenuity goes a long way. That's all. Until next time.